The political world always prioritizes the noise. It elevates the emotional over the analytical, the personality over the procedure. This past election cycle was no exception. The national media is fixated on the raw emotion of the moment, the viral clips of young voters, the rhetoric of freedom, and the easy narrative of a blue wave sweeping across the country. But if you are here, you understand that American politics at the highest level of power is not decided by emotion. It is decided by mathematics, legal procedure, and the strategic deployment of political capital. The single most consequential victory of the entire election cycle, one that has the MAGA establishment in a state of quiet, data-driven panic, occurred not in a contested swing state or a governor's mansion, but in California with the passage of Proposition 50, Prop 50. Proposition 50, a seemingly dry and tedious ballot measure focused on independent redistricting, is far more than a simple political win. It is a calculated, data-driven counteroffensive against the core Republican strategy for maintaining control of the House in 2026. The MAGA political blueprint relies almost entirely on gerrymandering, the strategic, partisan drawing of electoral maps to secure power, using brute force map-making to delay the inevitable demographic shifts working against them. California just used the democratic process to deploy a counter-tactic using the very same mathematical precision. We are here to perform a forensic analysis of Prop 50's true long-term significance. It's not just about 5 new competitive seats. It is about quantifying the economic cost of political instability. We will analyze why this procedural change, engineered to fight partisan fire with data-driven fire, is the single most terrifying development for the national GOP apparatus, and what it tells us about the only logical path to power in the upcoming cycle. Ignore the noise. The map, not the message, is the weapon that determines your financial future. The conventional analysis attributes the high Democratic turnout in California solely to social issues and youth fervor. This is a profound misreading of the data that blinds analysts to the true motivator: economic anxiety. While young people were energized by issues of social justice, their energy was ultimately channeled by a deep-seated survival instinct, locus of control, related to their financial futures. The voters, especially the educated middle class who passed Prop 50, were motivated by the devastating reality of California's affordability. Shock, the quantified economic cost of partisan. Gridlock, 1. Housing. And debt paralysis, the median home price in California is a national anomaly. Exorbitant housing costs, coupled with crushing student loan debt, mean that the American dream is statistically inaccessible for the majority of the 25-45 demographic. They are voting for any mechanism, procedural or ideological, that promises to break the gridlock preventing housing and debt relief. The competency deficit. Gerrymandered districts lead to politicians who are only accountable to their most extreme base. This creates legislative paralysis on complex issues like water management, power grid modernization, and infrastructure funding. This competency deficit forces the affluent, professional class to pay higher taxes for reduced services and increased systemic risk. The strategic choice. Prop 50 was perceived by these voters not as an ideological endorsement, but as a rational economic choice aimed at restoring functional, predictable governance. The affluent voters' highest priority is the stability of their asset value, and political chaos is a direct threat to property and portfolio stability. The data confirms. The California electorate, across all ages, voted to eliminate a political procedure, gerrymandering, that they correctly identified as a leading cause of fiscal irresponsibility and the resulting affordability crisis. The core significance of Prop 50 is its role as a direct, data-based counterattack against the successful Republican reliance on procedural map manipulation, the strategic act of fixing the map so the electorate's actual preference becomes irrelevant. The MAGA model. The strategy of force, the Texas blueprint. The national Republican strategy, exemplified by actions in Texas and Florida, was one of pure partisan aggression. They used their state legislative control to draw maps that maximized the number of guaranteed GOP seats, often ignoring population centers and minority communities. This approach is intrinsically designed to appeal to the rage trigger, fury trigger, of their base by confirming their belief that the political establishment is constantly under attack, justifying extreme measures. This is an overt use of political power to override demographic reality. The California model, the strategy of data and procedure, Prop 50. Prop 50 fundamentally changes the game by establishing an independent, non-political redistricting commission. This citizen-led body is legally bound to draw new house maps based on objective, verifiable criteria, population equality, geographic compactness, and respect for communities of interest, not partisan advantage. The mathematical impact, the 5-seat swing. The most critical data point confirmed by Congressman Ami Bera is the quantitative impact. Prop 50 is expected to make up to 5 existing House seats highly competitive or flip them directly to Democratic control. This immediate measurable shift is the mechanism that nationalizes the California result. The Democratic Party can tactically absorb expected losses in the South and Midwest if they can secure a net gain of 3 to 5 seats in the West. This means the 2026 election for House control is no longer about winning over the ideological center of the nation. It is about winning the mathematical procedure of the map. This act is a deep humiliation ritual for the MAGA GOP. Their reliance on fixed maps to win has been directly challenged by a superior, procedurally airtight and data-backed legal strategy. It proves that the fix they rely on is vulnerable to a better executed Democratic counteroffensive. The specific, tactical focus on Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley is a textbook study in activating the ego integrity flaw of the opposition, but with a precise, quantifiable charge: failure to fulfill his official duties. The charge of incompetence. The video presents cold, hard evidence. Kiley missing critical committee votes, specifically those related to U.S. citizens, veterans, and children with cancer, while simultaneously maintaining a public profile through social media. This paints a devastating portrait of professional malpractice, the data of absence. Quantifiable negligence. Every missed vote is a direct, measurable data point of legislative negligence. This allows the opposition to frame the MAGA politician as unserious and more dedicated to performative activism than their salaried, core legislative responsibility. The integrity flaw. For the educated, tax-paying Californian, the gravest political sin is not ideological disagreement, but wastefulness and distraction. Kiley's behavior, failing to govern while complaining about the new map, is presented as the ultimate confirmation that the MAGA apparatus is staffed by actors who are fundamentally failing the competency test. They are wasting taxpayer money and destroying the moral authority of their political wing through negligence. The data is undeniable. The most effective anti-MAGA message in affluent, highly educated states like California is not "they are cruel," but "they are incompetent and they are actively degrading the function of your government." These voters demand leadership that ensures a stable government capable of protecting their economic assets and delivering predictable services. The common ideological thread linking the victories across the country, from the progressive Zoran Mandani in New York to the moderate Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, and the procedural victory of Prop 50 in California, is the unified and overriding message of affordability. The data on anxiety and motivation, the priority shift, longitudinal polling data shows that for the swing middle class, economic anxiety, inflation, housing, debt has decisively surpassed cultural issues as the dominant political motivator. When faced with a choice between an ideologue and a candidate promising direct financial relief, the rational, survival-based choice wins. The GOP distraction tax. The national GOP's continued, relentless focus on cruelty, immigration, border issues, and highly divisive cultural fights, school curriculum, social politics, is now interpreted by the working and middle class as an enormous distraction tax. Voters conclude that a political party obsessed with symbolic, unwinnable cultural fights is a party fundamentally incapable of solving the core financial problems that are draining their net worth: inflation, high interest rates, and stagnant wages. The procedural victory of Prop 50 directly supports this economic narrative. It removes the partisan shielding, gerrymandering, that allowed GOP politicians to avoid accountability for their focus on cultural fights. In the newly competitive Prop 50 districts, candidates must now compete on substance, promising credible economic solutions. The election is a referendum on the price of bread and the stability of the housing market. The data is unambiguous. Voters will tolerate ideological differences, but they will not tolerate a party that ignores their financial pain or presents itself as fiscally incompetent. The ultimate tactical failure of the MAGA movement in this cycle was the catastrophic collapse of its predictive, polling and modeling apparatus. They confidently predicted Prop 50 would fail, relying on an outdated model of conservative turnout and an assumption that tedious procedural issues would not motivate a mass electorate. The technical failure points. Misreading Gen Z mobilization. The strategists failed to account for the unique, decentralized ability of Gen Z to mobilize rapidly through digital platforms. This phenomenon generates high-frequency targeted turnout that older models fail to capture. This is fundamentally a technological failure to understand modern political mobilization. Misreading suburban disgust. They severely underestimated the willingness of moderate, formerly Republican-leaning suburban voters to vote against the party for competency and procedural reasons. These voters do not convert to the opposing party. They become anti-MAGA proceduralists. Their primary demand is for the system to function, regardless of ideological outcomes. The flaw of gerrymandering reliance. They assumed the political momentum generated by partisan map-making in states like Texas would provide the necessary cover. California proved that for every partisan action, there is now an equal and opposite procedural reaction, engineered by highly skilled data scientists. This is a deep-seated intellectual humiliation for the party's strategic thinkers. The GOP apparatus was beaten not by superior passion, but by superior mathematics, legal procedure, and data execution. The procedural mechanisms of democracy, when defended vigorously, are the ultimate defense against partisan extremism and the most potent tool for driving economic stability. The California Prop 50 victory is not a final, emotional declaration of a blue wave. It is the most critical procedural, structural data point of the election cycle, a massive flashing green light for those who support functional, data-driven governance. It is irrefutable proof that strategic technical efforts can neutralize national political extremism. The tables have been turned. For the American Lens audience, the lesson is clear. The fight for economic stability is now inextricably linked to the fight for procedural fairness. The rule of law, not the rule of rage, the era of winning solely through gerrymandered, uncompetitive maps is ending. The results confirm that competence, procedural integrity, and a direct focus on affordability are the core, measurable pillars of the new American political landscape. The high cost of inaction. Every dollar spent by the national GOP on culture wars is a dollar not spent on solving the housing crisis, the debt crisis, or the inflation problem. California voters saw this equation with cold, hard logic. The political future will be defined by who governs better, not who yells louder. The procedural mechanisms of democracy are the ultimate tools for ensuring economic stability and preventing the kind of political chaos that destroys asset value and diminishes national integrity. Voiceover. I'm cold and decisive. We track the data every day, filtering out the fear and the fabricated claims. Hit subscribe and join the American Lens community to stay ahead of the next major economic and political shockwave. Don't be fooled by the headlines. See America through a clearer, more logical lens.